Okay. So please join me with this prayer. Om Ajnanaatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinashana Rasimhaiti Namini. Nam Mukam Paroti Vachalam Pangam Langayatim Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tatsat. So Hare Krishna everybody once again. So I'm just going to look through at what we have been doing for the last 5 weeks. So week 1, we talked about, basically we started with the chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita. We spoke about Dhritarashtra in more detail. How Dhritarashtra was basically having some inner desires to have his own sons to be the kings after him, right? And this led to the discussion about our own inner desires. So what we are all looking for. So these inner desires that we have is what we think will give us ultimately happiness. So we discussed how we are all in the end looking for happiness. We have all misdirected in our search for happiness. And on top of that, we are looking for it in the wrong place. And then we also showed how as far as happiness goes, there are different levels of happiness. And the highest level of happiness one can achieve is due to relationships. So we talked about that. And then we also spoke about how relationships in the material world are all temporary. And one should aim to have that relationship with the Supreme Lord, which is eternal and never disappoints. So then in week 2, we continued with still chapter 1. We talked about Arjuna's dilemma, how Arjuna was, the illusion that he was put into due to his relationship problem. So he had multiple relationships with many people who are all ready to kill him now in that battle of Kurukshetra. Then we also talked about Duryodhana. So the character of Duryodhana. And then we spoke about Drona Acharya, the teacher of the Pandavas as well as the Kauravas. His nature as a Brahmana, how he was very open-minded, how he was broad-minded in his dealings. And after hearing all these Arjuna's excuses, Arjuna presented about 5 excuses in chapter 1. And Krishna in chapter 2 rejects Arjuna's excuses. He calls them Hridaya Daurbalyam, weakness of the heart, and Anarya, not fitting for someone who knows the goal of life. So then in week 3, we talked about, then Krishna, after saying this to Arjuna, he started telling Arjuna, he started giving Arjuna knowledge. First, the first knowledge he gave, we understood that knowledge about the soul is the basic understanding. We have to first understand who we are if we are going to go deeper into spiritual life or into understanding spiritual perspectives. So we are the soul and we are not the body. That was the main message. And since we are the soul, what is the nature and the quality of the soul? We heard how the soul is eternal, unbreakable, insoluble, and things like that. And if it's eternal, what happens when the body dies? So we heard about reincarnation. So we went in detail about the topics of reincarnation, right? So basically, we are souls who simply travel this material world, changing body after body. What makes us do this? So this is due to our desire to enjoy various different experiences, and at the same time it is factored by our karma, whether we deserve it or not. So that is, and Krishna renounced Arjuna's excuse of compassion. So he, on the grounds of compassion, Arjuna did not want to fight. So Krishna said, you are the soul, they are the soul, so you're not killing them. You're simply killing the body for the sake of higher duty, for the sake of establishing dharma. So therefore, your compassion is misplaced. It should be for the soul, not for the body. So then in week 4, since we introduced the concept of karma, how the soul transmigrates from one body to another, we spoke about karma. But before that, we introduced the story of Chitraketu. How Chitraketu, his child died, and then the child was brought back to life. And then the child explained about reincarnation, how he himself had many, many father and mother. And in this way, Chitraketu and all the queens heard spiritual knowledge, and they also became sober and came out of their lamentation for their dead child. So in this way, we understood the goal of life. The purpose of life, right, is to understand that we are the spirit soul, and what is our relationship with God, and how to escape this cycle of birth and death. So when we talked about the cycle of birth and death, it's important for us to know what are the factors. So we introduced that the factors were desire and karma. So we need to purify our desires, and we need to ensure that karma is no longer acting on us. So these two factors, once settled, then we can be free of this material life and go back to God. So in week 5, we talked a little bit more detail about karma, because karma is a very big topic, complicated topic. So we had to understand the different levels of karma. Why good things happen to bad people, or why bad things happen to good people, right? So we understood this from the perspective of the soul. Reincarnation of the soul is the basis, and from there we can understand that karma comes from many lifetimes, not just this lifetime. So it carries forth from the previous lives, and there are different levels of karma. Karma in the form of the seed, karma as the seed grows. When we do an action, it slowly fructifies, and some fructify faster, some fructify slowly, and some will only fructify in other lifetimes, not within this life. So like that, there are different actions, and we heard the intricacies about karma, and we heard how complicated karma can be. So we illustrated some stories. So we talked about, there was the story about the cow and the brahmana, if you remember. And then we talked about Nirga, King Nirga, the one who did so much of wonderful charity, but in the end, due to one mistake, he ended up as a lizard. So to pass the karma of that particular mistake. So we heard how one good deed does not counteract a bad deed. So just by doing good, one cannot counteract the bad things that we have done, because they go into separate accounts. So there is the punya account and there is the papa account. Punya means piety, papa means sin. So good things go to punya account, bad things go to papam account. And in this way, we receive the results of both, either separately or mixed. So that is the complexities of karma. And then we talked about karma kanda. Karma kanda, because one of the excuses Arjuna gave was He didn't want to enjoy this kingdom. He said, what's the point I fight? Because even if I win this war, I cannot enjoy this kingdom. So he was talking, because everybody I know will be dead, and who am I going to enjoy it with? So that is basically karma kanda. Karma kanda means doing things for the sake of getting some result. So if we perform an activity, I'm doing it because I want to get something out of it. So that is karma kanda. So then Krishna is basically telling Arjuna, go beyond karma kanda. He actually counters Arjuna's argument even in karma kanda. He tells, even if you fight, if you lose, you will die. But because you fought for a spiritual cause in a holy place, and you did your duty perfectly, you will go to heaven and you will enjoy. If you lose, but if you win, then you will uphold dharma and you will get great piety credits, and you will on top of that enjoy the kingdom. So either way, you're not going to lose, right? As long as you fight. So in this way, Krishna counters Arjuna's argument also. So now in week 6 today, we will continue the narration. So these were, as you remember, Arjuna's reasons for not fighting. And we already talked about the first reason, compassion for friends and relatives, how Krishna refutes this argument by saying, just like how we change clothes, the soul in the same way changes bodies. So there's nothing to be lamented about the change of body. It's the soul which is always eternal, which never dies. And the soul is always going from one body to another body in search of its desire, satisfying its desires, and followed by its karma. So that question was already settled. That argument was already settled by Krishna. So then he goes to the next argument. Next argument was no enjoyment. This was also discussed last week, and we discussed how Krishna tells Arjuna, I just mentioned just now, that even whether you fight, if you fight, whether you win or lose, you will definitely get the piety. You will get the good result. So there's nothing to worry about having no enjoyment. So, and then he talked about karma kanda, how, as a Kshatriya, this is your duty, nothing else other than that. If you don't do your duty, then you will be made fun of, nobody will respect you. And if you don't fight only, you will not enjoy, because you're not doing your rightful duty. But that's very basic, karma kanda. So then Arjuna also gave another reason, fear of sinful reaction. So before we go there, let's see what Krishna also said about the karma kanda. So this is the second point, right? So I'm just quickly going to go through some other verses which we didn't cover, which talks about the same point about how, as a Kshatriya, his duty was to fight, and in this way he will reap the benefits. So Krishna in verse 231, he says, considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no other better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation. So as a Kshatriya, that was his duty. What's the duty of a Kshatriya? The Kshatriya's duty is among many things. One thing, the major thing is to protect. He is the guardian. Guardian of what? Guardian of Dharma, or God's law. So if he doesn't do his duty as upholding God's law or Dharma, then he would be not actually doing his duty in that sense. So here Krishna is saying, for a proper Kshatriya, that's your duty. And this is the fight, this is the war. One is in the Dharma side, in the side of virtue, and the other is in the side of sin, not dharmic. So you are in the side of virtue and you're a warrior. What better position for a Kshatriya, for a warrior, for a guardian? So definitely this is the ultimate thing. So then Krishna says, oh Partha. So Arjuna's name is also Partha, right? Happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought. opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. So when we do activities, when we perform our prescribed duty, we gain pious credits to our name. So these pious credits will open the doors to heavenly planets for enjoyment as a reward, right? So Krishna is telling, if you perform your duty properly as per the scriptures, then you will get these credits. So why do you say you don't want to fight? This is the best opportunity for you. So do not think about all that. Then Krishna continues, O son of Kunti, this is what I mentioned last week, right? Either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, either way, right, whether you win or lose, as a Kshatriya, you should do your duty. So Krishna says, therefore, get up with determination and fight. So Krishna is urging Arjuna to continue fighting. So we covered this last week, so I'm not going to go through this again. So then the third reason which Arjuna gave, fear of sinful reaction. Arjuna started telling Krishna, this is sin. So therefore, last week and the week after, the week before that also, we talked extensively about what is sin and what is piety. We spoke about karma, how when we do prohibited activities according to scripture, when we do things which are against God's instruction, then we commit sin. And what will sin give us? Sin will give us, it's like a punishment. It will give us suffering, misery, because ultimately it is causing harm to another person or to another living entity, even if it is unknown to us, because God's laws are perfect. So and simply for the sake of the disobedience aspect, that also causes us to go through negative reactions. So, and we also heard about piety, and we heard about how piety and sin both also keeps us tied to this material world. So let's see what Krishna says on that. Just let's go through some of the verses. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sin. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you are telling me, Arjuna, that if you fight, you will get sin? You are mistaken. So Krishna says, if you don't fight, then you will incur sin, because you are a guardian of morality, guardian of dharma, and that's your duty. People depend on you. You're a Kshatriya. And if you do not do your duty due to sentiment, then you certainly will incur sin for the lack of doing, for neglecting your duties, right? And thus lose your reputation as a fighter. We talked about this also to some extent in the previous, we gave some examples and all that previous sessions. Then Krishna continues, do thou fight for the sake of fighting. So then Krishna tells Arjuna to do something higher. How Arjuna, if he's so worried about sin, that in case in the course of his duty, he may have done something wrong, or accidentally may have done something which may have incurred some sin. In the course of duty, isn't it? Something may happen. So Krishna is telling, if you fight, if you do your duty with a certain consciousness, which I'm telling you now, I'm going to tell you now, if you follow your duty with that kind of consciousness, you will never incur sin. So what is that consciousness? Krishna is saying, do thou fight for the sake of fighting. That means for the sake of duty. Do your duty for the sake of duty, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by so doing, you shall never incur sin. So therefore, Krishna is telling, don't worry about happiness or distress, gain or loss, victory or defeat. It doesn't matter. What matters is you should do your duty for the sake of duty, right? Because it is what ought to be done, what should be done, so that everything goes smoothly. Right? So that's the idea. Now, what happens if doctors become profit-minded? So then something goes wrong, isn't it? So ideally, one should not be profit-minded when one is doing one's duty. So that's the perfection of this point. So this is what Krishna is telling here, right? We should do it for the sake of doing things. Just because the going gets tough, one shouldn't say, okay, I give it up and I will do something else which is not my duty. So that is not correct, right? So whether or not, it's like, for example, those days in India, the housewives in India used to cook. Prabhupada gives this example, Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavad Gita. He gives the example that the ladies in those days in India, they will cook for the family. And their kitchens are not so, it's not air conditioned and all that. It's basically a simple household kitchen. And the fire is there, and they actually use wood fire, right? So whether it is summer season or whether it is winter season, they will still cook for the family without considering comfort or discomfort. They do it as a sake of duty. So that's what Krishna is telling Arjuna to do. Do not consider happiness or distress, loss or gain, right? In this way, if you have this consciousness, if one adopts this kind of consciousness in doing one's duty, then one shall never incur sin. This is what Krishna is telling. So if you remember, right, we have account 1, karma, action. We heard there were 2 types, right? There's punya karma, pious action. Example, activities which are in line with truthfulness, cleanliness, austerities, and mercy. So like that, there is also account 2, which is papam or vikarma, forbidden activities. So if we do forbidden activities, right, then we will collect sin. If we do pious activities, then we will collect punya. So both of that, we will either enjoy in heavenly planets or suffer in hellish planets, and then again take birth according to our karma, what's remaining of our karma. But remember last week and the week before, we talked about there is a third account. There is another account. So there is karma, vikarma, and akarma. Akarma means no action. Anything you put an a in front, that means it negates the word. For example, karma means action. If you say karma, that means no action. So even though one is doing action, but there is no result, there's nothing which is collected out of it. There is no, this account 3 will not go into account 1 or account 2. We talked about this last week. So Krishna is saying here, this is the same point, right? So what is this akarma? This akarma is what we call yoga, activities which we do in yoga. So this is what actually will not, it's neither piety, neither is it sin. It is yoga. So it's a third category, right? So we should not confuse spiritual activities as pious activities. Because sometimes people will get confused. They think pious activities means spiritual activities. No, it's not the same. Pious activity means good activity. For example, charity. For example, truthfulness. For example, cleanliness. For example, austerity. All this is good activities. This is in a moral level. It's not spiritual. Spiritual means you take these good activities, you plus with God. Then it becomes spiritual. That means any activity which is trying to connect with God or trying to please God or trying to serve God directly. So the motive is God. So then that becomes, or the motive is higher realization. The motive is spiritual realization. So this kind of activity, yoga, is what I'm talking about as akarma, which is not piety. These are called spiritual activity or transcendental activity. That means beyond matter. So piety or punya is still within the material world, right? So whereas transcendental activity or spiritual activity helps one to come out of this material world. So that's the difference. Okay. So one more time, piety or punya gives enjoyment in one's life cycle, in different life cycle. Vikarma or sinful activity causes suffering in one's life cycles. But it's still within the material world. Both are within the material world. Right? So both of these, account 1 and account 2, both ties us within this world. Pious activities is like a soft, shiny, fragrant rope. So the rope is soft and it's shiny and it's very beautiful and it's comfortable, but it's still a rope. It's tying us around. So whereas sinful activities is like a thorny, burning rope. So when we are tied with such a thorny, burning rope, we suffer. But both of them, nevertheless, are ropes. So they tie the soul into a body in different material bodies within the material world. So Krishna says in verse 39, thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. So this is what Krishna is now telling Arjuna, go beyond. Don't think about enjoyment. Don't think about sin. I've already answered your arguments on all this sin and enjoyment. Now Krishna is telling, go beyond. Think about coming out of this material world. Think about escaping this cycle of birth and death. Don't just think about enjoyment and suffering. Don't think about that. Go beyond. So, O son of Pritha, when you act in such, Pritha comes from the word Priti. Arjuna's mother is Kunti Devi, right? So another name for her is Pritha. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. That means from the bondage of karma. Whether it is punya or papa, you can free yourself. How you can free? By this consciousness, by working without fruitive results. So that is what Krishna is introducing, the concept of yoga to Arjuna. So this is what we call the third account. This is karma. Though you are performing action, but it doesn't cause bondage. So therefore, it's called karma. And why is that? Because it is transcendental. It is spiritual, right? That's the understanding. So this karma is like the scissors. This karma, whatever spiritual or yoga activity that we do, is like a scissors which actually cuts these bonds, which is due to the punya and papa. It cuts these bonds and frees us from this material prison world, so that the soul is free to fly back to God. So then, to encourage Arjuna more, Krishna tells this verse. It's a very famous verse. Devotees like this verse very much. So we memorize this as well. Neha vikramana sosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpam api asya dharmasya dhrayate mahato bhayat. Translation: in this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution. That means any kind of loss, right? And a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So very important verse here. So because Arjuna is thinking, now what you're saying, Arjuna, Krishna, you're saying do your duty without expecting results. Okay, it doesn't sound very easy to do. So he may have this doubt. So to clear this doubt, Krishna is saying, in this endeavor, in this yoga endeavor, there is no loss. You will not lose the result of doing other work simply because one is doing yoga. You will still get the benefit of every other duty that one has to do, right? And there is no loss of any sort. And Krishna says, even a little advancement, right, on this will protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Now, what's the most dangerous type of fear? Mahato bhayat, right? It saves one. The most dangerous type of fear for a soul which transmigrates is the fear of going through its bad karma, isn't it? Going through its sinful, the reactions of its sinful activities. And that means suffering in hell, in hellish planets, or taking animal life within this world, animalistic life, or animal life, or plant life, or this kind of various lives, right? So those kind of lives are extremely, it's not a very comfortable life. Animal life and all that, it's full of fear. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that if you follow the path of yoga, you will be protected from going through these kind of situations. You will be assured at least a human birth. In human birth, you may go through some ups and downs, but at least one does not go to hellish planets. One will not get lower life forms. For a practitioner, a serious practitioner of yoga, because even a little advancement can protect one. So that's what Krishna is telling Arjuna. So therefore, he's trying to encourage Arjuna. Therefore, Arjuna, don't worry about heaven, hell. You worry about yoga. Try to become fixed in this endeavor. So this is the message of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, to highlight this verse 240, I would like to tell you a story which shows the power of bhakti. Now, as we know from Gita Gyan level 1, Bhakti Yoga is basically the culmination of the yoga ladder, right? When we follow yoga, ultimately, it is the topmost form. So we can either begin Bhakti at the lower level, or we can eventually come to Bhakti from various directions, from various other processes. So we are going to tell a story about how one who is even the type very basic practitioner of Bhakti also, he is actually saved. Now this story is not simply an imagination. It comes from no less than a scripture like Srimad Bhagavatam. So this story comes in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the king of all scriptures. And it's about a person called Ajamila. So I'd like to tell you about this Ajamila. So this Ajamila was a Brahmana, and he was born to a very pious family, a pious Brahmana father and a pious Brahmana mother, and they had many children, and he was one of the younger child. So like that, he grew up. He was well trained by his father. He trained. He knew all the mantras. He was carefully being trained in every way to be a good Brahmana. But what happened one day as he was growing up? One day he was already married. He had a wife. At one point of time, he was married to a wife, and then he lived separately after that with his wife, and then they started to have a family with his wife. And then one day, this Ajamila, his name is Ajamila. So one day he happened to travel from his house to somewhere, and on the way back from wherever he was passing through a forest pathway. And in that forest pathway, he happened to see a couple. Now, this couple is like a low-class man and another low-class woman. It's like a prostitute type of a woman, and they were having an affair. So he happened to see them hugging and kissing and having a very it's not a very nice scene, a very highly romantic scene. So this Brahmana, he was very he grew up in this manner, but as a Brahmana. But when he saw this scene, his mind became attracted, and somehow he didn't go away. He didn't turn his face away, or he didn't move off. He hid behind a tree, and he was watching the scene, what was happening, the kissing and the caressing and all that, the romantic scenes, and how the man, it seems the Bhagavatam will describe that they were both drunk. The man was drunk, the lady was also drunk, and due to their drunkenness, their clothes were loose and in a disarray and almost falling apart. So they were almost semi clothed, and in this way they were having a relationship. And he happened to see this, and he was attracted in his heart. He didn't want to leave. He saw, and then finally when they left, he was very disturbed in his mind. He kept thinking of the girl, of that lady. He was completely smitten by the lady. And what happened, instead of going back home, he followed the lady back. So he was trailing the lady, and the lady walked home, and he also followed behind. And he was so, by the time he reached her house, he was so completely maddened with lust over that lady that he actually shamelessly went and knocked the door. And then when the lady opened the door, she saw, "Who are you? You look like a good Brahmana." And then this Brahmana, this Ajamila, he said, I'm completely smitten by you. I want to have a relationship with you. I have a lot of money. Okay. I come from a good family. Please accept me. So in this way, and the girl, she was just a simple prostitute. So to her, she didn't care. So she was very happy. Okay, he was good looking, he was young. So she just wanted to enjoy. So she, come, please come stay with me and everything. So in this way, he enjoyed with her, and then later he went back, but he couldn't remain in his house anymore after that. He kept thinking of this lady again and again and again, until he left his wife, he left his family, his children and his wife, and completely left and came and stayed with this lady. So and the wife was crying, the children were crying, and the entire village was condemning him, but he didn't care. He became from a high class Brahmana family, he became a complete outcast. So he was reviled by society. People didn't like him, and everybody completely ostracized him. They in fact banned him from coming to their village again. So in this way, this Brahmana was staying with this woman, and whatever money he had, he brought from his home. He used it to please this lady. Now, to keep a prostitute like that happy is not easy. So he had to, keep giving her gifts. So he started giving her money. He started buying her jewelry with whatever money, but the money was dwindling. It was going down and down and down. And then Ajamila, because he was ostracized from the other villages, the Brahmana community had rejected him. His own family had rejected him. So he lost his livelihood. He didn't know where to get extra money. And he desperately wanted to marry this woman. So what he started doing, he started to rob people. He went to the forest, he will hide in the tree, and he will wait for people to come. He started to rob. And in this way, he got more money, and the prostitute lady was also happy, and they got married. But after they got married, they started having children from this unholy marriage. So they had one child, two child, three child, four child. In this way, they had many children, and their family was growing. And this man, due to the pressure of keeping her and the family together, and having lost his livelihood, he completely forgot his previous life, and he started to become a dacoit, or a bandit, or a thief, right? So he became a thief, and he went about doing all kinds of things. He stole from people, he burgled people's houses, and he even he started even killing people, murdering people just for their wealth. And he didn't care whether it was, eventually he didn't bother whether it was man, woman, young, old, children. And he plunged, in this way he spiraled down and down and down until he became one of the most feared and reviled bandit in the entire area where he was staying. Everybody used to fear him, right? There was nothing he did not do. Murder, kill, pillage, everything he did. So like that, he collected money in this way, and he kept his family. And in this way, they lived for a long time. So he lived, and once he reached a very old age, they were still having children. And it said that he was almost 70, and he still had a child, a young child, the last child. This is the 10th child. Around the age of 60 to 70, he had the 10th child. But somehow, the 10 children that he had, all the other 9 children, he allowed the prostitute to give the name. He gave the prostitute gave the names, various names, all kinds of other names. But for his 10th child, as he grew older and older, somehow he remembered his young life, how he was when he was young. And he remembered how he used to worship a special deity of Narayana when he was young. So he named his last child, the 10th child, Narayana, out of fondness, right? And he was the youngest. So like that, they lived. And one day, when he was 70 plus to 80, or very old already, and his youngest child, Narayana, was about 4 years old, like this, he met with death due to old age. He was going to die. Out of extreme old age, he was going to die. And what happened? Srimad Bhagavatam describes the scene. It seems when he was about to die, he was completely, everything went dark in his vision. And he started to see very horrible creatures coming to him and laughing at him and jeering at him and coming to him with ropes. So this is a picture of the description. He saw these horrible creatures like that. They came, and this is Ajamila. You can see he was extremely scared. He was so scared, he lost consciousness, and then he came out again. And in this way, out of complete fear, he was one thing about Ajamila. He was very attached to Narayana, his youngest son. So he always, when he was alive, he used to call the boy, he used to sit with the boy, he used to, play, eat together. When he eats only, the boy will eat. So like that, they were very close somehow. And when he was dying like this, out of fear and out of compassion, he just suddenly, out of no reason, called out to his son, Narayana, Narayana, like that. He called out to his son. And as soon as he called out this Narayana, Narayana to his son, then what happened? Suddenly, these shining personalities came. These beautiful, extremely shining personalities came. And they immediately stopped. They said, halt to these demonic-looking creatures. And then they stopped. And then after that, what happened? There was a conversation between these shining personalities and these demonic creatures. Now, this entire conversation is described and narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Very interesting conversation. So, in any way, to cut things short, these demonic creatures, they are actually the Yamadutas. Yamadutas means, Duta means ambassador, basically servants. Servants of who? Servants of Yamaraj, the god of death. So Yamaraj, he sends this kind of Yamadutas to pull sinful people to forcibly towards his city, where they will be judged, and then they will be thrown into different types of hellish planets. It's described in the Garuda Purana. There are thousands of different types of hells. Each hell is like a planet with all kinds of things. So like that, Yamaraj is the master of all that. And these Yamadutas were trying to take the rope and pulling his soul out of his body in a very painful manner. But while that was happening, suddenly as I said, these shining personalities are called Vishnu Dutas. They are coming from the spiritual world. And these Vishnu Dutas, they look just like Lord Vishnu. It's described that they have the same form and the same forearm form, and they also carry the Sankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. They look just like Vishnu. It's described that all the people in Vaikuntha, they look exactly like Vishnu. But Lord Vishnu, there's a certain difference. He has the Kaustubha money, the jewel, certain paraphernalia which he holds, others don't have. So, but these are Vishnu Dutas, very beautiful, effulgent personalities. And then they have the conversation. The conversation went like this. Basically, they asked these Yamadutas. The Yamadutas asked the Vishnu Dutas, who are you that you are stopping us from our duty? Don't you know our master, who is Yamaraj, the god of death? Even other devas do not interfere in Yamaraja's jurisdiction. And Yamaraja's jurisdiction is most important and all that. And we are his servants, and this is a very sinful person. He has lived his life full of sin, right? He has completely thrown aside the pious credits that he had as a young child, and he did so many horrible things. So now you're bringing him to be judged by Yamaraj. Why are you stopping us from doing our duty? So then the Vishnu Dutas, they said, oh, just see how you do not know the ultimate principle of religiosity. If you are so well versed in religiosity, can you tell us what are the different aspects of religiosity, and how in what are the things that one deserves to go to hell, and what are the things one cannot be punished for? So in this way, the Vishnu Dutas asked Yamaduta. And then there was a very lengthy conversation there taking place about, what is religiosity, what should be punished, what should not be punished. So like that, it went on. But Yamadutas, they couldn't understand. They said, yeah, in all our calculation, this person, Ajamila, is a sinful wretch. He needs to be punished. There is no other reason for you to stop us. Then the Vishnu Dutas told the Yamaduta, do you not know that he called out the name of Narayana? And do you not know that calling the name of Narayana, the Supreme Lord, even if it is not he, when Ajamila called the name of Narayana, he wasn't calling the Supreme Lord Narayana. He wasn't calling Vishnu. He was simply calling his son. But because he had named his son Narayana, even if he wasn't consciously calling God, but because he uttered the name of God, even if it is unconscious, the Vishnu Dutas are saying all his sinful reactions have completely been wiped out. So you cannot claim this person to hell. So if you don't accept my statement, go and ask your master Yamaraj. So in this way, the Vishnu Dutas dismissed the Yamadutas. The Yamadutas also couldn't say anything. These people look so powerful, so they just disappeared from the scene. And when they disappeared, the Vishnu Duta also disappeared. And while this conversation was going on, you can imagine this Ajamila, he was actually witnessing the entire conversation. When he saw Yamadutas, he was completely scared out of his wits. And then when on top of that, he was witnessing this horrible conversation about his fate, right? And then to his great relief, finally the Yamadutas disappeared, the Vishnu Dutas also disappeared. And when he got back, and he didn't die. So he was given a second chance. So that's why this topic is sometimes called the second, Ajamila gets a second chance. So he was allowed to continue his life a little bit more, because all the sinful reactions were removed due to him uttering the name of Narayana. Now, when he uttered the name of Narayana, he did it with all sincerity. He did it with complete sincerity when he said the name Narayana. But he didn't say it because he wanted to call God, but still he said Narayana. So you can understand how even unconsciously saying the name of God is enough to wipe out the entire lifetime of sin. Just once he said this, and it was enough to wipe out the entire lifetime of sin. But that was not enough for Ajamila to go back to Godhead. So therefore, he was given a second chance. So after he woke up from his coma, then he was a completely transformed person. You can imagine, like, if you had such a situation happening to us, we would also be completely transformed. It's nothing like a great shock to wake you up. So he immediately left his home. he left his family, and then he went, he remembered all, he tried to recall everything that he had learned from his young life when he was a young person growing up in his father's house. And then he went straight away to the Himalayas. He went and surrendered himself to a guru there. And then he learned, he continued his spiritual practices. He continued chanting the names of Narayana, 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 like that. And then finally, this is a picture of him. Let me just show the picture. This is the picture of him going to the Himalayas. So he spent the last dregs of his life desperately trying to be spiritual, to make up for everything. He practiced spirituality by chanting the names of Narayana constantly. And finally, at the end of his life, when his death finally came again, this time it said that the Vishnu Dutas again came. And this time they came on an aeroplane, a very beautiful Vimana. Vimana means it's like an aeroplane. So it came and it brought Ajamila inside. Ajamila, when he died, he immediately got a four-arm form, just like the Vishnu Dutas. He also developed it. Here it doesn't show, but it says that he came, and then the Vishnu Dutas brought him on this beautiful aeroplane, and they flew back to Vaikuntha. So this is the story of Ajamila. So one may ask the question, how was it that Ajamila somehow was able to name his son Narayana? So that was because of the piety of the spiritual activities which he did when he was young. So all that spiritual activity did not go in vain. Even a little bit of spiritual activity which he did when he was young, despite letting it go and falling prey to his sinful tendencies, it was enough to somehow help him to say the name of Narayana at the end of his life. So when that happened, he was completely saved from his sinful reactions. So that is the story of Ajamila. So this is narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Very nice story. And this illustrates the power of the holy name, the power of spiritual activity, or the power of bhakti. So, the verse just now I said, Neha Bikrama Nasusti Pratyavayu. So even a little bit of advancement is sufficient to save one from the greatest fear. So this is that example. And then there is another example. So here I'm going to tell you another story. Now this story, you already would have heard about it. This is the story of Prahlada Maharaj and Narshingadev. The Prahlada Maharaj who had a father who was a demon called Hiranyakashipu, right? You have already heard this 2 times in Gita Gyan level 1. So you might ask, how was it that Prahlad was born this way? What did he do in his previous life that Prahlad was born with such qualities? So that's one of the scriptures, I think the Varaha Purana it was, which mentions what happened to Prahlad Maharaj in his previous life. So it said that in his previous life, the soul of Prahlad, in his previous life, in a different yuga, actually, in a different universe, he was a Brahmana, and he was a young Brahmana, a 4th son to his father, and his name at that time was Vasudev. So this father of Vasudev had many children, and he was the 4th son of this Brahmana. So, but somehow, again, his story is also similar to Ajamila. Somehow he got corrupted by sin. He also fell in love with one prostitute, and due to bad association and bad company, he left his family, and then he also somehow was, he didn't do that kind of sin. No, he was just enamored by this prostitute, and they were going about together like a boyfriend, girlfriend. They were not yet married. So he used to run away from his father's house, and he used to be with this prostitute, and they used to have a relationship. So it was going on like that secretly, all right? And then one day they were walking like this in a nearby forest. They thought, let me go to usually they have a rendezvous. a place where they meet. So the place where they meet happens to be a ruined temple. It's an old ruined temple. So they meet there because usually nobody comes there, because people think, you know, there are a lot of wild animals in that area, or so nobody comes there. So what happened, they always go and meet there. Now one day it so happened that they went in the evening, and then they went in the morning. They went in the morning, and then they spent the whole day. They did, and they sat in this building, in this ruins, but somehow they had an argument. This Vasudev and this prostitute girlfriend of his, so they had a sort of an argument, and somehow the argument became so passionate and so disturbing that they ended up arguing throughout the night. And it was throughout the night, and they didn't sleep the whole day. They didn't sleep, and throughout the night they didn't sleep. They were arguing and arguing, and then they were and things like that. And on top of that, they didn't eat anything also. They were like completely, in one sense, they were so busy arguing, they had no time for food and all that. Anyway, they didn't bring food, so it was finished. So anyway, this happened, and after that, in the next morning, when they finally, when morning came, so then they somehow dispersed and they went back to their home. But it so happened that when these people, when they grew up, and then later when they died, this boy, this Vasudev, when he died, his next life, he became Prahlada Maharaj. So then somebody was reciting the story in the scripture. I forgot who it was. So the person who was listening to the story, they asked him, how is that possible? This person is so he was, you know, nothing he did. What was so great about him? Why did he end up as Prahlada Maharaj? How is it that he was able to be born in that kind of life? So then the answer was given. It seems that when they were arguing, right, on the day they met, this temple is actually a very ancient temple, and it so happened that it was a temple of Lord Narshingadev. It was a broken down temple, right? And it happened to be a temple of Narshingadev. And it so happened that on the day that they were arguing without food, it happened to be the day of Narshinga Chaturdasi, the appearance day of Lord Narshingadev. So without knowing, not knowingly, they actually stayed awake throughout the night, and they also didn't eat anything throughout the day. So in one sense, they actually observed a fasting. They actually observed the vrata of Narshinga Chaturdasi without eating, without drinking water, and without sleeping, and somehow that too inside a temple of Narshingadev, and that too during Narshinga Chaturdasi day. So the scriptures glorify this kind of vratas on the appearance days of the Lord. You know, so many wonderful piety. So the credit of this, simply doing it unknowingly, was sufficient to wipe out all the sin of this Vasudev boy and give him the wonderful opportunity. But of course, due to some sins, not all. So due to that, he had to take birth in the family of a demon. Now, Hiranyakashipu was a demon, right? So somehow he took birth in the family of a demon. But nevertheless, because of the wonderful act of fasting on Narshinga Chaturdasi, he had the opportunity to meet Narada Muni. So if you remember the story of Prahlada Maharaj, when actually the mother, when Narshingadev, when Hiranyakashipu, his father, he actually did some severe austerities because he wanted to kill Vishnu, because Vishnu killed his brother Hiranyaksha in the form of Varaha, the boar incarnation. So Hiranyakashipu, he out of revenge, he had an ambition. His ambition was to drink the blood of Vishnu. So somehow that's what demons do. So he went and did very severe austerities. And then while he was doing this austerity, this Narada Muni and Parvata Muni, they took the form of a bird, two birds, and they happened to sit near a tree. And while this Hiranyakashipu was meditating, these birds took turns to say the name of Narayana. So, Hiranyakashipu hated the name of Narayana. He hated Vishnu. And suddenly, while he was doing meditating, trying to concentrate, and these two birds, one on the left and one on the right, one will say Narayana, and the other one will say Narayana, and one will say Narayana. So like that, can you imagine the scene? He's trying to meditate, and Narayana, 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 and this is the name of the enemy that he's trying to kill. So he tried, and then he just couldn't take it anymore. And then finally, out of disgust, he got up and then he walked away. And then he went back home. And when he went back home, his wife, Kayadu Devi, was there. And then he said, okay, oh, Kayadu Devi said, you're back? I thought you are in doing austerity. Say, no, I was disturbed. I will continue it tomorrow. I will start again tomorrow. So before he actually started his full austerities, he came back. And then on that night, he happened to have a relationship with his wife. They conceived. So, and while he was having this sexual relationship with his wife, somehow he, at the point, somehow while he was having the relationship, he remembered these two birds and how they were saying Narayana, Narayana. So the name Narayana, he remembered somehow. So in that way, this child was conceived in the womb of Kayadu Devi. So this is called Garbhadana Samskara. It's a samskara. In those days, even now also, when we want to have children, it's actually a samskara. It is not simply something which one does out of lust and all that. It is actually a samskara where we do this to invoke the pure souls. All souls are pure, but what I mean is more elevated conscious, those souls with more elevated consciousness. So there are always those kind of souls in the material world hanging about. So it will attract that kind of soul according to the consciousness that we have at the time of conception. So in that way, this Vasudev, in his previous life, he came into this womb of Kayadu Devi. So after that, this Narshingadev, he left. Sorry, not Narshingadev, Hiranyakashipu, sorry. He left again to do austerities. And while he was doing austerities, and Kayadu Devi became pregnant, this Indra and all the devas, they kidnapped Kayadu Devi. They kidnapped Kayadu Devi and they wanted to kill Kayadu Devi. They wanted to kill the child within the Kayadu Devi's womb. Because they thought if Hiranyakashipu is such a great demon, imagine if he has this child. This child will be an even greater demon or as great a demon as him. We cannot handle two. Even one also we are bad. We cannot handle it. So let us kill this child. So they were going to do something so cruel. They were going to do something so sinful. But luckily they were saved by Narada. Narada came in the scene and he said, don't do this kind of cruel things. Don't worry. This soul will not be a demon. He will be such a devotee that the world will not have seen such a devotee. So then when the devas heard this, they were happy and then they left. And then Narada Muni brought Kayadu Devi to stay with him in his ashram. And while Kayadu Devi was pregnant, Narada Muni will every day recite the Srimad Bhagavatam to Kayadu Devi. Now Kayadu Devi, she will hear and sometimes she will not be attentive. But somehow the child within the womb would attentively hear. Now this is described also, something which one should do, right? Modern science also, they put Mozart music and all that to children while they are in the womb. So this is something there even those days. Bhagavatam explains, after a certain month, the child develops consciousness within the womb. So therefore, Narada Muni was reciting the Bhagavatam and the child inside was hearing the Bhagavatam. So simply by hearing the Bhagavatam from the lips of a pure devotee like Narada Muni, this Vasudev, now Prahlad, in this womb, whatever impurities he had left were completely removed and he became a pure devotee. So that's why when he was born, he became Prahlad Maharaj, due to Narada Muni's association. Right? So this is again a wonderful recitation about how even a little bit of advancement, even a little bit of spiritual activity, even a little bit of bhakti, even if it's done unknowingly but sincerely, then it will bring us a very, very far away from sin. It will save us from the greatest type of fear. So that's the point of this story. So back to Arjuna's reasons for not fighting, right? So we heard about fear of sinful reactions. And then Arjuna gave the fourth reason, destruction of family traditions. If I continue fighting, all the seniors will die, all the leaders of families will die. What will happen to the family members? What will happen to the children and the women? They will not be protected, they will be exploited. And this will cause a lot of unwanted population. It will cause a lot of what they call Varana Shankara, that means unwanted population, illegitimate children who are in this way, a lot of and this will eventually cause a lot of chaos in society. So Arjuna didn't want to be party to this. Then Krishna told Arjuna, no, if you don't do your duty only, you will cause this. And he will say that in chapter 3 later, right? We will talk about that. He says, if you don't do your duty, because your duty is to protect dharma. Now, if you're talking about if you run away from your duty and if you don't protect dharma, then the world will be taken over by adharmic people, by very sinful people, or demonic people. So, and where is there any, and where is the question of protecting family tradition then? When demonic people who do not cherish dharma are ruling the world, what will happen to all the good traditions? Everything will be destroyed. Nobody is going to follow. So that will only create sin. So therefore, she tells Arjuna, you should fight. Then final point is indecision. So Arjuna talks about, I don't know what to do. If you are saying this, my heart cannot accept it. So what to do? I don't know what to do. But luckily for Arjuna, he was able to surrender to the Supreme Lord Krishna, and in this way receive instruction. So Krishna continues his instruction in chapter 42. He now addresses this point of indecision. Now we heard how Krishna already told Arjuna, go beyond. Don't simply dwell in piety or sin. Go and do yoga. So therefore now Krishna continues that point. He tells Arjuna, men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. Now, these Vedas, as I mentioned last time, there are many, many things mentioned in the Vedas. It's actually called the manual of the universe, right? So therefore, everything is there. How to even perform one's duty, how to do economic things, how to be a good king, all kinds of things are mentioned in the Vedas. But to get this is for the sake of human development. So humans know how to do everything, how to cook, how to play music, how to dance, how to heal, how to make medicines, how to live a healthy life. Now these are all material things. And all this is mentioned in the Vedas. So at the same time, there are also spiritual things which are mentioned in the Vedas. How to go beyond. Now, most of it, 70% of the Vedas is 75% of the Vedas is mostly karma kanda, material things it talks about. So, but 25% of it talks about spiritual things. So therefore, Krishna says, don't be attached to the flowery words of the Vedas. Don't be attached to that part of the Vedas which recommend karma kanda or fruitive activities for elevation to higher planets and all that. Like for example, all this gemology and all these kind of things, all the yantras and all that. So these are all material. So Krishna is telling, don't be attached to all this simply for desire for sense gratification and opulent life. Some people will tell you there's nothing more than this. You should, get your desires fulfilled. But Krishna disagrees. He says, Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunyo Bavarjuna, Nirdvando Nitya Sattvasto, Nir Yoga Shema Atmavan. This is all chapter 2 still, verse 45. He says, the Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the three modes of material nature. So if you remember, mode of passion, mode of ignorance, mode of goodness. So Krishna is telling, oh Arjuna, transcend Traigunya, this three guna, Traigunya Vishaya Veda. The Vedas are mainly talking about the three gunas. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna, go beyond, transcend these three modes. Don't just stay within this level. Go to the platform of yoga, which is also described in the Vedic literatures. He says, be free from all dualities. Dualities means likes and dislikes, desire and aversion. So be free from these dualities, which is basically the root cause of why we are in this material world. So, and he says, and become free from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So this is called yoga. And then Krishna tells Arjuna, because all purposes served by a small well, what are the purposes of a small well? You can use a well for drinking water, for doing washing clothes, for whatever. All purposes which a small well can give us can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. So whatever the well can do, this great reservoir of water can do that and more beyond that also. So what is he trying to say? So therefore he says, similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So therefore, the real purpose of the Veda is to basically help human beings to live in a proper way, how to live in a pious way, how to learn to provide for himself, how to get the benefits from the devas, how to live a good life, how to and eventually how to go beyond this life and death, and how to go back to Godhead. So this is the ultimate purpose of the Vedas, right? So therefore, one who knows the purpose of the Vedas automatically can be served, right? Everything else, all the benefits of piety, everything else can automatically be attained by someone who knows the real purpose of the Vedas. Okay, so we don't have too much time. It's 9:46 already. I wanted to finish this, but there's still a few more to go. I don't want to rush it. So what I will do, we will skip this. I wanted to talk to you about a bit of the Vedic literature. So we will skip all this, and we will go straight to the last part on questions. So I will continue this later, right, in the next session. So what we have understood so far, we have understood that piety and sin is still material. So we are not interested in enjoying or suffering. So because that still keeps us trapped in the cycle of birth and death. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, try to go beyond, try to do things which will, try to do those activities called akarma, which will help you to connect to the Supreme and to help you escape from this material world and go back to Godhead. So therefore, this kind of processes or this kind of activities are not ordinary activities. They may look ordinary, but the consciousness is very different, the goal is very different, and therefore they are called transcendental or spiritual activities. And they do not cause sin, they do not cause bondage also. So that they will, and at the same time, they will give you the benefit of everything else. So you are not going to lose anything by performing yoga. You will in fact stand to gain everything. So that is what Krishna is telling to Arjuna. So, and we heard two stories about how even a little bit of advancement can bring us the greatest benefit. So now we like to end here with some questions. Any questions from anybody? Okay, it looks like there's no questions. Let me check the chat. Okay, the chat is also empty. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the story and understood the meaning behind. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to type and in the WhatsApp, and we can address them also. So I'm going to give you a quiz because we did not finish everything, but I think you should be able to answer those quizzes. So just try your best anyway. I will send the link shortly after this. Okay. So we can end here. So before we end, we are going to do our chanting. Let me go back to my share screen so I can share the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Okay. So if you have got your beads with you, we will do one round. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Krishna Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram Ram Hare Hare. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta